Absolute pleasure and a joy to be here talking about something that's innately difficult and tricky. And I'd just like to welcome three friends onto the stage. Tony, thank you, Dan and Darren. Cheers. We've all got 20 years of experience in cyber, and it's been every day I think that we learn something new. And in our experience, and I've been advising governments, NATO, the World Economic Forum, cyber is really hard. Right? It is large, it's complex, it's played out on a global scale, and it's the moments, the seconds, the individual interactions that make a huge difference. For Vodafone, we look after over 300 million users around the world, 160 million IoT devices, over 18 billion download equivalents of data every single day. And what it means in that context, with every mouse click, every second, every conversation, connection, when a user and a data come together in an infrastructure or in a digital landscape, we are under pressure, we're under attack, and we are being given not only a beautiful digital playground to explore, but we are given unease, and our trust is being attacked on a daily basis. Across Europe, there's a ransomware attack every 16 seconds. Many of you will have experienced a cyber crisis, and that's something that we really want to talk about today, because, make no doubt, our adversaries are exhibiting brutal innovation in the same way that we are collaborating and innovating today together. That brutal innovation is being turned on us using the tools, the AI, the collaboration methods to exploit, destroy, and delay the digital value that we are trying to create. That's a little bit of what I'd love to talk to you about in the panel here. So, I mean, gentlemen, if you could sort of introduce yourselves very quickly, and we'll get right into it.
Yeah, so I'm Tony, the VP Services for Kudelski Security, a pure security player, part of the Nagra group, which is helping Vodafone TV protecting their devices. And happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're very, very pleased and proud to have the partners on stage with us, and particularly Nagra. You may not know, Vodafone's one of the Europe's largest pay TV providers with over 22 million pay TV customers, and Nagra help us protect that content, those services every single day. So it's, again, great thank you to all of them, our partners. But Dan, welcome.
Thank you. Dan Woods. I'm the Global Head of Intelligence at F5, and over the last 30 years or so, I've worked for multiple local, state, and federal law enforcement and intelligence organizations in the United States. Among those, the CIA as a cyber operations officer, and the FBI as a special agent. And I, too, am really happy to be here, looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Dan. Head of Intelligence. There's a beautiful title, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Darren, welcome.
Thanks. I'm Darren Anstee. I'm the CTO for security at Netscout. I've got about 25 years of experience working across a wide range of aspects of security for both enterprise and service provider, but focusing a lot more recently on the distributed denial of service side of things.
Thank you. So, the topic is, what are the pitfalls in a cyber crisis? And arguably, the world is in a period of cyber crisis. Right? We live in almost a digital fault line, as I sort of describe it. But surely, the easiest way to avoid a cyber crisis is, just not to have one. I mean, is that even an option? I mean, are we able to be secure and safe any longer? I mean, what do you think?
I meet a lot of CISOs in my daily job, and the CISO that said that he's not being attacked so far is lying, or he doesn't know what he's doing. So you're constant under attack, and given what you said in the introduction, the complexity, you already have been hacked. Often when we do investigations, forensic work, we see multiple traces from an attack, also from previous ones. So it's a fact. 10 years ago, people said it will not happen, but they all have been learned the hard way, and we read it in the news every day.
Yeah.
So
They say, don't they, that organizations fall into one of two categories: those who recognize they're being attacked and those who are in denial. And I think there is that, and also that 10 years ago it was large organizations that were being targeted, and now it's every single one of us as individuals, citizens, employees, no matter the size of your organization. And that's something we feel very keenly, that we have to simplify security, right? We have to make it accessible to all, not just those large, complex, well-funded organizations. And Dan, you've worked for some very large, well-funded organizations looking at that complexity. And in your experience, is there something that you just shouldn't do?
Yeah, I think that you shouldn't ever lie about the attack after it happens. I think immediately organizations are most concerned with what the headline's going to read. And I think that they should make sure, I really think that enterprises are judged by how they respond to these sorts of attacks, not necessarily the attack itself. It's like they say, the cover-up is always the worst part. So you just do your best to defend against that attack and be transparent with your customers, and you move on. You're in good company now if you're attacked. A lot of the Global 2000 with great budgets, great equipment, and impressive skilled teams are all attacked. And I would add that you shouldn't just be concerned about the successful attacks. Many of you are under enormous amount of automated attacks from bots that aren't necessarily successful, but they're costing you quite a lot in infrastructure costs. And since the theme of this conference is a lot about being environmentally conscious, think about what 98% bot traffic does for your infrastructure costs and power consumption. It's something that everybody should take a serious look at.
Don't lie. It's always a good place to start from a law enforcement officer.
It's simple, but sadly it isn't always followed. And I had an investigation that led to an obvious compromise at a large top 5 bank in the United States. I went to them and told them about the compromise. My evidence was I had all of their customer data in my hand. And they said, there's no way you can prove those are our customer data. And they were right. I guess it could have been another bank with all the same customers. But they refused to make the disclosure, and my hands were tied. So you'd think it's really simple advice to follow, but once some of the attorneys get involved, I think it isn't followed all the time.
Yeah. And there's a moment, isn't there, in a sort of an evolution of a crisis when somebody tells you, you find out, and that unfolds, and there's a very famous quote about no plan surviving first contact with the enemy, paraphrased by Mike Tyson when he was going to face Evander Holyfield. That says, and they said, have you got a plan to how you're going to fight Evander? And he said, no plan survives being punched in the mouth. And I think for many organizations, that moment, right, when you don't know whether to tell the truth, the whole truth, to lie, to not, to open, admit guilt, right, that's a real moment of sort of soul searching, and that all of the plans you have may not actually be relevant at that moment in time. And Darren, what is something we should do, and can we use plans and playbooks to advise us on what you should do in minute 1, minute 2, hour 10 of a major attack?
So I think plans are very important because they give us a structure to follow during a very stressful situation, and every cyber incident can be a very stressful situation. So having that plan can help. It can also help in terms of ensuring consistency of process, so in terms of recording the right information at the right times, that doesn't get skipped when people are stressed, if there's a process that they need to follow. And from a broader perspective, it helps us really understand where there's areas that we can better automate to improve our operational efficiency, attack response times, those kinds of things. But more broadly, I think having a plan, having a set of playbooks gives us something that we can exercise, and exercising that plan or that set of playbooks tells us whether our understanding of the infrastructure and the assets that we're defending is correct, and it tells us whether our defensive capabilities and our understanding of those are correct as well. So it's a very good way for a security team to understand whether things have changed underneath them that they simply haven't been told about. So having that plan is key. As you say, though, in a crisis, there are things that we simply can't plan for. There are situations where we're going to have to improvise. And the one thing I would say there is that, from my experience in the kind of the DDoS side of things, it's very important to keep a broader perspective on the organization and the assets that you're defending. There is a a big kind of a need to focus on the individual incident, to get that tunnel vision to deal with the incident that you're facing. But you have to keep that broader perspective as well, because there may be other things going on. There might be things that you do to deal with a given incident that might have an impact to other parts of the organization in terms of exposing vulnerabilities, causing problems, a whole range of things like that. So plans are great, but there are situations where obviously we can't cover every scenario.
And something Darren just said is worth reiterating. Yeah, you have to have a plan in place, of course, but unless your plan is a perfect plan, you also have to be prepared to deviate from that plan.
Yeah.
I met with a security team who was under a ransomware attack, and they went right to the run book. They started executing the run book just like they should. And one of those steps was to send email notifications to certain email groups, and it occurred to them that their entire email system was down. So they needed to come up with an alternate to have that communication. And since that attack, they have a whole separate communication schema separate from the enterprise for just that sort of incident. So you got to have the run book, and you should stick to it until there's clear evidence that you need to deviate from it. So that's the challenge, is knowing when it's clear evidence and not suffering from anchoring bias and just sticking to the plan no matter what.
The beauty from the crisis is it's always different than you prepared. Mm-hmm. So I've been involved as crisis manager in multiple big crises, and it's always different than an organization prepared, if they prepared. Yeah. And first of all, I think it's important to understand that a crisis is different. Managing a crisis is different from day-to-day business. Yeah. A lot of management teams think, I can manage this crisis. They jump in a room together and they're going to try to solve it. Yeah. First of all, the question is, it's always happening at the moment that you don't expect it. So it's Christmas Eve, people away. So getting people, hold on people to help and join you is limited. And you cannot continue doing that for a crisis, as at least I think you said 21 days. You cannot work 21 days, 24 hours a day. And three, you need to understand that the crisis is different. There's a lot of uncertainty. You need to make decisions with a lot of uncertainty, and you're not really sure about the consequences. That's why it's a crisis. For me, there's an incident. Okay, we need to solve it. We more know less what to do. But the crisis is really huge. And you need to understand, ask the question yourself, am I ready, prepared enough to really do this crisis management? Because else you will start lose hours and days, even in the beginning, without any steps really taken forward. So yes, plans are important, but look at Corona. I had limited number of clients which had a plan which were dealing somewhat to the Corona crisis. And most of them did the exercise of plan, which was good. So they had at least some experience, but they had a lot of improvisation to deal with Corona, which create all new kind of different challenges when you're being attacked. Yeah.
That level of preparedness is something that it's sort of difficult to estimate and quite intangible. And I think as you describe it, it's always reminded that we're used in our day-to-day lives. So yes, we like to narrow down and we like to focus on things we can control. And we're used to making decisions based on facts, information. And if we're not comfortable making a decision, we might delay it. We might ask for more information. We might dig a bit deeper, get a second or a third opinion. Within in a crisis situation, you will not have all of the facts at your disposal. You will be forced to make uncomfortable and difficult decisions that are a compromise and push you out of your comfort zone. And to some extent, that's the beauty of having a blueprint and a process, a playbook, that will give you the confidence to make those difficult decisions. And I think that's a really important thing. Right? It's the people in the room executing the plan that's difficult. And yet, I'm sure you will all agree and recognize that finding amazing, talented security people is hard. Yeah. Right? Who is going to advise your board, your communications teams in those moments of crisis? Are you seeing a real, how do you attract and retain security talent and keep them engaged for those moments when they're, really needed? Is that something that, you face on a day-to-day basis?
People is the daily challenge to recruit them. And for me, it's difficult to get experienced people. There are limited experienced people. So for us, it's a lot of efforts in also training people on the job. And especially, I came from UI, where my team was half female, which is quite unique in cybersecurity. I'm now doing the same at Kudelski Security. But the reality is that I trained a lot of women on the job to get them their real experience. And by the way, I strongly believe in different personalities, male, female, but also different cultures, which brings a lot of value into the team. And when you have a real challenge, those different personalities will help you quicker, sooner, more creative, resolve this kind of challenges. So
we are not a poster for diversity sat on the stage, sort of four middle-aged white
for men.
And yet, our internal team is over a third female, and the neurodiversity of security, practitioners and professionals is really important, because actually being able to recognize patterns, to sift through large amounts of data, to find that one needle in a haystack of needles is critical. And Dan, is it possible to predict an attack, to predict who is going to attack you, how they will attack you, and where or when? Can we get left of bang, as we call it, in security?
I don't think you can predict the precise date and time of an attack, but I think that's kind of the wrong question. I think most people in this room now are under constant attack all the time. The question really is about what date and time will the successful attack be? And I really think it's important to address the attempted attacks as well, because as I said, you may not realize it, but there are a significant amount of bots hitting your infrastructure. I can't tell you how many times we've gone in line and deployed our signals and gone to the enterprise and said, 98% of all your traffic is malicious bots. And they, that's jaw-dropping for them. They estimated it was 20 to 30%. So yeah, I don't think that there's a way to know the date and time of a successful attack, but rather than trying to figure out the date and time of the attempted attack, I think you should just accept the fact that you're all under attack all the time, and that you should also focus on stopping those, because that will prevent, if they never get to your server, then the attack isn't going to be successful. So I think something that very serious for everybody to think about is the amount of bot traffic, because I think that our heads are in the sand. Mine was until I joined F5 and realized that, wow, this is a serious problem that people are not taking seriously enough.
Yeah, I think, agreeing with what Dan said there's a lot around intelligence that we can use here. So intelligence is a great source for any organization in terms of learning from the research and experience of others about what may be coming at them next. And that can obviously help you best prepare for the attacks that you're going to be facing. There's a lot of noise all the time, the kind of generic threats that we all see every day, scans for vulnerabilities, phishing campaigns, things like that. But it's those more targeted kind of attack campaigns that represent a lot more risk for us. And getting intelligence from government, from others in our vertical, from regional organizations that are willing to share can really help us get better prepared. We do a lot of that at Netscout in terms of feeding information out into our customers on what we're seeing in one part of the world and how it might then start to move into other parts of the world as it starts to weaponize.
Yeah, and that's critical, right? Because most organizations don't face a unique one in a million zero-day attack, and we're facing waves of similar attacks against similar organizations, and our ability to collaborate, share intelligence, and innovate together, right, is absolutely vital. And yet, security remains complex, difficult to understand, and to some extent we have our own language. Bots, malware, phishing. Are we really thinking about, and how should we be helping organizations understand security when maybe they don't have the experience and education we do? Is that a real issue, particularly for smaller organizations?
I think the reality is that security, first of all, as you said, try to keep it as simple as possible. Because we see often that it gets quite complex because there's a lot of legacy, even by smaller organizations. So keep it simple. That keeps it clear. Then you have a better understanding what is happening, is something happening, what you're talking about, and not these cables and connections somewhere connected, creating issues. And two, the reality is it's complex, and outsourcing is something to consider. Definitely, if you need to monitor your environment 7/24, you know, that's something it's difficult to do even for big organizations yourself. So in a lot of things, we are comfortable to outsource it. We don't do it ourselves as an organization. But sometimes the security, we think, well, we can repair our own car. Well, there are a few people we can, but most people, certainly I cannot do it, and I go to the organization which can do it. And I think it's a bit the same for security. You know, focus on what you're really good in, make that better, and the things you are less good in, leave that to the organizations which can help you.
And I think there's something important in that. There is there's an old phrase that the last thing you should outsource is your security. But actually, the first thing you should look to partner with is security, because you won't have the knowledge, the experience of the landscape. You won't have people who are dealing with incidents every single day in a variety of sectors, right? You cannot be trained and experienced enough to do this alone, right? This is, you can't do these things on your own. And I think that's a realization. And it's back to your point about an extension of your point around not lying. Right? I think we all have to admit that this is this is an existential threat. It's a digital pandemic we're facing, where every single day, and we cannot lock ourselves down. We have to connect. We have to understand how we trust each other, and then how we respond in moments of crisis. Is there something? I mean, there's an audience and many people out there who are looking to connect people, places, and things in wonderful ways, right? It's the digital world. But is there something you would ask them to do? Something that you would say, like, when you leave this room or watch this online, there's something I'd like you to do so that when you experience a cyber crisis or a risk or a threat, bear this in mind and you will be immeasurably better prepared. Is there anything that you would say, like a sort of a takeaway? I mean, don't lie is a good start, right?
Yes, don't lie is
build write a playbook, then throw it away, right?
Yeah.
Sort of the jazz of security, have the notes and then improvise on the way through.
For me, it would be, there is a crisis, so you need to start handling. But just take 5 minutes to think whether you have organized it in the right way, you have the right capacity and capabilities to do it. Don't start running to put out the fire while you're not able to put out the fire. So think about a bit, having the right people, having the right support, have the right tools to really deal with this crisis. And if not, get them, because you will need them anyways later in the process if you don't involve them. So take 5 minutes and then start acting.
That's brilliant. So take 5 minutes to just think carefully and recognize we are under constant attack. This is not going away. You may not be the most prepared you could be, or even you may not be prepared at all to deal with this. And think about what you do. Dan, what would be your...
I'd say two things. Quick anecdote, I went to a Fortune 500 company, to the CISO, and I said, hey, we found what we think is manual fraud against your applications. We'd like to get in front of your fraud team. And he looked me right in the eye and he told me to F fraud. And I was a bit shocked, like, oh, okay, strange. And then I go to another enterprise within weeks with the same report. We're finding a lot of manual attacks. I'd like to talk to your fraud team. And she reached over, picked up the phone, called fraud, and they all ran in. So two bookends of the kinds of organizations that we deal with all the time. And the point there is that it typically isn't a technology problem or a budget problem, it's a leadership problem. So I would encourage all the components within an organization to have a more a collaborative relationship versus an adversarial one. And then the second thing is you should explore the power of client-side signals. studying how, the browser does floating point math or renders emojis. These are all things that can help you identify whether the traffic is good or bad. And it does it in a way that is frictionless, which is something we should all be striving for, right? Improved security, but no increased friction. So those are the two takeaways that I would like to
Thank you, Dan. Darren, what would be your takeaway?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo two of the things that Tony and Dan said. So coming back to the skill shortage and the outsourcing, I think it's really important for every organization to understand where their strengths and weaknesses are when it comes to security. There's as we're building out security capabilities, there's a kind of a want to keep things to ourselves because it's security, but we have to be willing to admit where outsourcing would be a good idea and making sure that we've got those relationships in place. The second key thing, kind of echoing what Dan said, is security can be much more effective if it's collaborative, and that's big from a kind of an inter-organization relationship prior to a crisis. But for anyone that's actually involved in an incident, I would say having a kind of a pre-built list of the key people in your service providers, in your partners, in your competitors within your vertical, people that you can call in the heat of the moment that might be able to help you out, having that list pre-built is hugely important because you won't be able to find their contact details when you really need them. Do it in advance.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's perfect setup. I mean, we believe that it is a collaborative experience. We've built an amazing set of partners and protecting one of the world's largest networks. Our single goal is to make security simple and to give organizations of all sizes access to this expertise. And it's not often you get security folk on the stage talking about security. We like to hide away and do the good, make the good fight. And I'd just like to make a huge thank you for coming and talking to us about your experience today. It's a pleasure working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And before we go, I just remind everybody that the people and users are important. And if there's one thing you take away on top of this, that passwords are important. Think of your passwords like your underwear. You shouldn't share them with people you don't know. You shouldn't leave them out in public sight, and you should change them regularly. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.